So what did we just say? The Gemara said that even samach lemincha gedola, even when you're close to a big mincha, meaning mincha gedola, we said is 6.5 hours into the day, 12 o'clock noon. If it's 12 o'clock noon, you already cannot start a meal, you cannot start your haircut, you cannot start the court case. And the Gemara in its first language says what type of meal, what type of court case are we talking about? A type of situation where it's going to be drawn out because it's, we're talking about a large meal, like a meal for a wedding we spoke about, or you're starting a court case. That's the type of items that could be drawn out. That was the first answer of the Gemara, correct? Where you know when you're dealing with a long an item that could be really drawn out, that's what we're afraid from at 12 o'clock, in that example that we gave, 6.5 hours in a day. But let's say you want to eat a small meal. According to this first language of the Gemara, there would not be a problem of having a regular at 12 o'clock, 12:30, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, until Mincha Katana, perhaps, until Mincha Katana, for sure, you would not have a trouble to having a regular meal with, you want to have a falafel, you want to have a regular lunch, a normal lunch, a Rosh Chodesh, normal Rosh Chodesh meal. Not talking about a Rosh Chodesh, having a grand big meal, but just having a regular meal would be permitted at 12 o'clock, 12:30, according to this opinion of the Gemara, because we're not concerned it's going to be drawn out so long that you have to be concerned you're going to forget to pray mincha, correct? So, if it's a big meal, see, we have two gedolas going on at the Gemara. We have something called mincha gedola, mincha katana, suda katana, and suda gedola. So if we'll talk in English, if we'll talk in the English terms, large meal, small meal, mincha gedola, and mincha katana. So we're saying now a large meal will be forbidden at the time of mincha gedola. A large meal will be forbidden at 12 o'clock, 12:30. But, and Rabbi Shmuel Levi, that says that you can't eat, you would have to stop. If you started, he's talking about if you started your meal later on in the afternoon. And we could say, even if you started a small meal, but once you started a meal in the afternoon, you would have to stop because once you started in the mincha katana time, once you started that later afternoon time, then you would have to stop. But when you started in the mincha gedola framework, when you started with a great big meal, which you should not have done, but you would be able to continue that big meal because as long as you have enough time to finish that meal and to pray. That is the approach of the first opinion of the Gemara. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar, Rav Acha bar Yaakov has a more stricter opinion. We're now on 9b2. He says, L'olam b'tisporet didon. He says that even our haircut, even our regular haircut, you still will be a problem from close to mincha gedolah at 12 o'clock. Now, our regular meal will be a problem at 12 o'clock, even though it's not a large meal, a small meal. What's the issue? And even if it's a regular haircut, not this special haircut that we mentioned of Ben Elasa, who had this fascinating haircut that every hair reached the root of the next hair. Rather, if that's the case, if we're talking about a regular haircut, why can't I take a regular haircut? So the Gemara says, Shema Gezeira Shema Yeshava Hazug. Maybe the scissors, you start the haircut, maybe the scissors would break, and then you would hang around and wait till they get new scissors. And until maybe it gets new scissors, maybe the time for davening will have passed. Since the time of davening will have passed, and therefore you would miss out on mincha. So we say don't start a haircut, a regular haircut, until you pray first. And then if you pray first, then you'll be fine. Similarly, Why can't you go into the bathhouse? It's a regular bathhouse. You're getting washing yourself with cold water, hot water, maybe getting a shampoo. But we're not talking about now the Gemara says, even if you're not going to wash yourself and bathe yourself and do you, not like the Gemara said, yes, the other opinion says you did a full all 9 yards, bathhouse, washing with cold and washing with hot and shampooing your hair and taking a sweat, so you're sweating up, is even lahaziyah ba'alma, even if you only went to get, to sweat up, what do they call that, Mr. David? The schwitz. You went to a schwitz, you wanted to sweat up. Nevertheless, so why is it such a problem so early on at 12 o'clock, 6.5, 6 hours into the day? Because maybe because of the heat, you will feel faint, you feel, get weakened as a result of the heat. You get, and you won't be able to pray. It knocks you out. The heat, we all know heat knocks people out. If you go to the schwitz and it was a real schwitz and it was really hot, so therefore that type of activity you shouldn't do. And then the law would be not only going for a schwitz, but anything similar type of activity that will knock you out, and you might, might be in position to pray. Now, Velula Borsiki. Now, what's the story with the tanning of the skins? So we said before that the other opinion says the concern is only if you're going in, you have a lot of skins to tan, and that's a lot. That's a long project that you might get caught up in. He says no. Even if you're going not to tan the skins, you're going to look into how well the skins were done, were taken care of. Milo. So what's the problem? You're only going in to the factory to check on the skins. Dilma chazeh pseida bezvine umitred. Maybe you will see something wrong in the skins. You'll see that, the skins are already fading, or they did not they're getting ruined. Time, maybe sometimes with time, the skins are losing its strength, and you're gonna feel very bad about it. That maybe you make the skins, you're looking into your skins, and then you see that, and you got to. But here the Gemara is not saying even a different thing, David. Maybe because I'm going to be distressed, I'll forget to pray. By the way, David, the Rambam says your reason. The Rambam says that if you'll see that the skins didn't come out well, maybe you're going to try to fix it. And you're going to be busy fixing the skins, fixing that type of merchandise. It's a type of merchandise that you fix, and you might forget to pray. Right. They're not right. They're afraid. Right. They're afraid. Right. They're afraid that if you might get drawn out. You might get drawn out all the way, or you'll forget to pray. But it is interesting, David, that they do say that technically, if you started, you could continue, as long as you're confident you're not going to forget that you have enough time to pray. But you shouldn't get started in you shouldn't start. Certain things don't start. So the Rambam says, because maybe you're going to fix the skins. Rashi says the concern is that maybe you're going to just be distressed from not that it didn't come out good, and then you're going to be just so focused on your stress, and you'll be troubled, and you'll forget to daven. Now, by the way, the Magen Avram, one of the commentaries, say that according to the opinion that says that we're afraid that the scissors will break, and then because of that you will be drawn out, the haircut will be drawn out, and you'll forget that you won't pray. But if you have two, it could be that if you have 2 or 3 scissors, meaning if the barber at today's day and age, morning Ralph, barbers have multiple pairs of scissors. Good morning, Ralph. Ralph, David says hello.
Hi, David.
Yeah.
Good.
You put a big smile on his face, I want to tell you. He says he misses you, Ralph. Ralph was here yesterday.
Did his brother ever find us tefillin?
Did your brother find you? No, not yet. Not yet, Ralph. Didn't find it. And and so according to that, if you have 2 or 3 pairs of scissors, so you shouldn't really be so concerned that maybe the scissors are going to break and you're going to, until you get new scissors, when you already have multiple pairs of scissors available for you. So that's something that you know, according to that opinion. Okay, so the Gemara continues, and v'lo le'echol, and even eating, you can't go ahead and start a meal according to this opinion at chatzot, 6 hours into the day, closest mincha gedolah. Why not? Dilma ati atelim shuchei. Maybe sometimes you start a meal and you had in mind to have a small meal, but then you draw out your small meal and you create it, make it a very long meal. Excuse me, maybe you might not make it into this big, large meal, festive meal like a wedding, but sometimes people, when they get involved and they're eating, it gets drawn out. So therefore, this opinion says that you should not even lechatchila start a meal once it's close to mincha gedolah. And below din, you shouldn't go to court. So it's not only the beginning of a court case, even if you're going magmar din, you just want to give a verdict. The judges are going in just to tell the litigants the verdict. So why can't verdict? If you're going to start a case, that's a very lengthy process. But if you're going to give a verdict, what's the problem by just going in to give a verdict? So the Gemara says because Dilma Chazi time of Dina. Maybe let's say you're going to give a verdict, and maybe one of the litigants will say, "I have something to say," or I have a new idea. So you say, "Okay, let me hear what you have to say before I give a verdict." And then I say, "Wow, you know what? I didn't know that piece of information." Or you walk into the court and someone coming to give a verdict, and then you're thinking about it a little more, and then you say, "You know what? Maybe I gotta start to ask some questions again and start over again." And or or let's say you're coming to give a verdict and you're talking over with maybe some of the other judges, and then one of the judges say, I see it, I see, I feel that we should give, I feel this is the right because of A, B, and C, and then you weren't seeing it that way, and now you got to start over again. Wow, I didn't know that piece, I didn't realize that piece. With that you bring up a good point. I think we have to start, and you'll start again, and then you will forget the premincha. And then you'll have to start again the case. Now, so Rav Acha by Yaakov, it comes out he forbids to begin even a small type of activity, small meal, a regular haircut, all these type of activities, when there are concerns that these type of activities could be drawn out, could lead to other things, that he forbids it even close to mincha gedolah, all the way at 12 o'clock. Now, in the halacha, we find a great argument among the Rishonim exactly how to go. Right here we have 2 different sides of the coin here. One side of the coin is only when it comes to chatzot, the only thing you have to be afraid of chatzot is a big meal, or a big haircut, special haircut, or starting a court case. But the regular meal, the regular haircut, there's no concern at 12 o'clock. That is the first opinion. And the second opinion is much stricter, that he's even concerned about a small meal, because that might get drawn out into a big meal, much bigger, much larger. So how do we paskin in halacha? So that is the case, the question. Don't stop. Oh, very good. So they both say whatever the opinion is about chatzot, meaning if we're talking about that you started at 12 o'clock or 12:30, 1 o'clock, whether you started the large meal, which according to the opinion is the only concern is you can't start the large meal that early. Good morning, Emmanuel. You can't start that large meal at 12 o'clock, at 1 o'clock. But if you started that large meal so early in the day, even though you should not have done it, you could continue. You don't have to stop as long as you're confident you have enough time to pray. And according to the other opinion, if it's a small meal, if you started a small meal 12 or 1, you can also continue as long, right? But according to both opinions, what about in the afternoon, close to Mincha Ketana? It would seem we could infer perhaps that maybe you can't start in the afternoon. Maybe you can't start in the afternoon a small meal. And if you did start in the afternoon a small meal, you would have to stop. That you could infer, because if everybody is talking about the Mincha Gedola time, that the issue of our Mishnah, meaning the Gemara is suggesting that our Mishnah, when the Mishnah says you can't eat and you can't do court and you can't take a haircut, is Mincha Gedola. So the Mishnah is not discussing Mincha Katana. It's talking early in the day. And then the Mishnah says that allowance that David is talking about, that if you did start, you could continue, that's Mincha Gedola. But it doesn't say that you have those rights at Mincha Katana. Because the Gemara wants to say, because Rabbi Shua ben Levi says, you can't continue by Mincha Katana. And certainly you can't start by Mincha Katana. So according to this approach, it would be that in the afternoon, 3 o'clock, in the nine hours into the day, you would not be able to start a meal. You would have to, even a regular meal, you'd have to stop. That would seem to be, according to this approach, according to all opinions. So there's a difference of opinions, and maybe we'll see more in halacha, I think we said that the Svardim take the most strict approach. And this it would seem to me in these halachot, the Svardim they go with this last opinion of Rav Acha bar Yaakov. That's why you'll see a gimel on the word la'olam b'tisporet idon, and the Svardim hold you can't even take a regular haircut, you have a regular meal already at close to Mincha Gedolah. That is the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch for the Svardim, because he says you cannot even have a meal, even a Suda Ketana. How do you like that, David? How do you like that, everybody? That even you can't have, when it's close to Mincha Gedolah, when it's close to 12:30, 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock, you already can't have your meal. It's time to pray, or you're getting close to the time of Mincha. If you're within a half hour Mincha time, let's say today around 12 o'clock, you want to start a meal, you cannot start a meal according to this formal meal, unless, like we said, you can rely on the fact that if you go into a minyan later on, there's I would say you got what to rely on if you have a set minyan to go to. Okay, so that is at least the Sephardi opinion. The Ashkenaz opinion, the Ramah says that there are those that are lenient, even samach lemincha ketana, even 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they allow a small meal. There are those that allow that, and the Chavetz Chaim brings down that, but what about 9.5 hours of the day? Meaning, we said if you're close to Mincha Ketana, close to, let's say, if you're at 3 o'clock, there are those that are lenient. What about 3:30 and afterwards? So that he also brings different opinions on that. And the Ramah explains what would be the reason for this leniency of the Ashkenazim. And it seems that he wants to say, because they're relying on the fact that we call people to shul, meaning they're in the old days, maybe they would make an announcement, it's time to go to shul, or similarly, if you have a set minyan to go to shul. So therefore, that's that's what we can rely on, and therefore you could go ahead and eat in the afternoon. At least that's what the Ashkenazim are relying. Right, you have a set minyan that you go every day, and people see he's the language of it is that they call out to go to the minyan. But I believe it's not just if someone, even if no one's calling out, but the fact that you go to that minyan every day on a set basis, that's just like someone's calling you to come. You have yeah, that's like the alarm if you go to the minyan. So therefore, that should be the leniency for the, at least because really we have to see what will be the leniency, why Ashkenazim could have that small meal in the afternoon, when it seems like from the Gemara over here you would not be able to have that even small meal in the afternoon. Okay. Now let's continue in the Gemara. So the Gemara says, we said that if you went to a haircut, if you started a haircut, then you don't have to stop your haircut. And you could go ahead and continue. And then after you finish your haircut, then you will pray, right? We said, the Mishnah stated, there's a time that you're not supposed to start your haircut. When it's close to mincha, don't take your haircut. Don't start your haircut. But if you did start your haircut, maybe pray first. But if you did start your haircut, we said what? You can continue the haircut, finish the haircut, and then pray. What's called starting the haircut? How many hairs were hairs cut? If that actually the hair has to start being cut? Or is it, remember, when you go into the barber chair, what do they put on you? They put on that like apron on you, right? Nothing has changed in thousands of years that they've been putting on that apron to protect that the hair should not go on your body, right? That's the reason Rashi says why they put the apron on your knees. So nothing has changed. So what's called the beginning of a haircut? When you put the sheet of the barbers on the person who's getting the haircut, al birkav, they put it on your knees, covering your body, in order that your clothes, you shouldn't get the hair on you. What's called, you start once the bathhouse has started. Does it mean you started, you're already in the bath? No. When you go ahead and you take off your turban or your hat, you started taking off your clothes, you started getting undressed. Once you started getting undressed, that's the first opinion. That's how Rashi understands. The Rambam understands is when you actually took off your undergarment. You started taking off your undergarments, not just your overgarment, your what you wear above your body, like a hat or that type of stuff, a hat or a jacket. No, it's talking about your undergarments. That's the Rambam. That's called that. At that point already, it's very interesting that's already the rabbis were lenient that if you started, you did not, and even though that you would say that's considered very not such a serious start, right? You just started getting undressed, and you got undressed, or you even just putting this apron on you, that doesn't seem to be such a big deal. But yet the rabbis already said that that's a start, and we're not gonna tell you to have to stop. You can continue as long as you have time. Remember to after you finish to pray. Then the Gemara continues. What is the time that is the tanning process, right? We said when you go in for the tanning, once they began, we allow you to go ahead and continue the tanning. You don't have to stop. So the Gemara says that's mishayikshar ben kaseifav. When you tie your sleeves, because let's say you don't want your sleeves to get in the way of your work, and you tie them. They say over here that what do? You tie your sleeves between your shoulders. They say over here you slip your arms out of your sleeves. You tie your sleeves behind your back. You don't want your sleeves to get in your way. So that is when you go. That's called already. You started the tannering process. Even though you didn't start the tannering, but you already began the preparation, so to speak. And then the Gemara says, what's called that you started eating? We said if you started eating, you don't have to stop. The Gemara says, when you wash your hands for the meal. If you wash your hands for the meal, that's the start. You wash it tilat yadayim. That's the start. When you untie your belt, right, Asaf? There are people. It's very common. People untie their belt when you go eat. What do? People, they need a little extra room because they feel more comfortable. They untie their belt. They loosen their belt. So once you went ahead and you did that, that's already considered you started. And the rabbis say you don't have to stop. The Gemara says, now are these two different opinions? Meaning, are they arguing? This opinion that says when you wash your hands for the meal, does he hold that if you untie your belt first, it's not called starting? So the Gemara says, no, they're not arguing. Below pligi. Halan halahu. One is talking about the people in Bavel. People in Bavel and Babylon, they would tie their belt tight. So when they want to eat, they would untie their belt before they wash their hands. So that's called starting. However, halahu in Eretz Yisrael, the root of Rav was talking in the Holy Land. The Holy Land, they did not tie themselves tight with their belt. And therefore, it wasn't common for them to loosen their belt before they eat. Like today, here us in America, we don't generally loosen our belt before we eat. Maybe there are some people that do that, but because we don't tie our belt tight. So therefore, that's why he gives the time of washing your hands. Now, the Gemara continues. Ama Abaye. Abaye says, Lahani Chavren Bavloi. Our friends, the Babylonians, he says, Shalamandi Ama, meaning we spoke about that in Bavel and Babylon, they used to tie their belt tight, and therefore before they ate, the common custom was they would loosen their belt. So he says that our Babylonian friends, meaning Abaye was in Eretz Yisrael, and Abaye says that our friends, our Babylonian friends, that take off their belt, they loosen their belt before they eat. The mandi amat filat arvit rishut. The opinion that says arvit is a rishut. There's a Gemara that has a discussion. Is praying arvit, Ma'ariv, Amidah, Ma'ariv, and the brachot of the brachot before Kriya Shema, or the brachot after Kriya Shema. Is that especially the Amidah of arvit? Is that a obligatory prayer, just like Shachrit and Mincha, or is it not as obligatory Shachrit and Mincha? Maybe Tosfos says it's a mitzvah, to pray Arvit. Everybody would agree it's at least a mitzvah to pray Arvit, because corresponding to corresponding, because every, like the Shachrit corresponds to the morning offering, the mincha in the afternoon corresponds to the afternoon offering, but at night, there was the burning of the fats and the limbs that were not fully consumed by day, but the offering would be kosher even without that process. So therefore, since it's not integral, so some say it might not be that level of obligation of arvit, like shachrit and mincha. And there was an argument in the Gemara about that. But Tosfos points out everybody agrees it's a mitzvah. But the question is what level obligation is it? At the end of the day, the Gemara concludes that even though we might behold that it's not the level of the other prayers, but the Jewish community has accepted upon themselves arvit like an obligation, like the other prayers. So practically, we treat arvit just like the obligation of mincha and shachrit. So that's what the Gemara says. According to the opinion that says arvit, like I said a moment ago. Now, so he says, once you took off your belt, we're not going to go ahead and tell you to put your belt back on and pray arvit. Rather, we will say you could continue your meal. You took off your belt. You can continue your meal, and after you finish your meal, then you will pray. That meaning to say, if you didn't untie your belt, so there's a mitzvah to pray arvit, you have to pray arvit. But if you untied your belt, since arvit is not the same level obligation as the other prayers, you could go ahead. Good morning, Mr. Dava. Great to see you. We're discussing, our Gemara is discussing there's certain types of activities that we have to go ahead and refrain from in order to prevent us from missing out on praying. So the Mishnah said you can't start a meal before you prayed mincha. You can't start a meal, because if you start the meal, we're afraid you might get caught up in your meal and you won't pray. And the Gemara says, Mishnah also says, similarly, like we said, you can't go ahead and take a haircut. You can't go ahead and take a haircut when it's time to pray, because you might also get caught up in your haircut. So now the Gemara says that ulamandi amachova. So the Gemara says, but according to the opinion that says that arvit, the prayer of arvit, has the same level obligation of mincha and shachrit, that just like mincha and shachrit, there is a obligation to pray. According to that opinion, that arvit, you have the same level obligation to pray arvit as mincha. So what will happen, according to that, if you started your meal, right? If you started your meal, if you put on if you took off your belt, like we said in those days in Bavel and Babylon, they would untie their belt to start the meal. So if they untied their belt, they would have to go ahead and put back their belt on and to pray. Because the implication is, this opinion seems to be saying, only if Ma'ariv is a mitzvah, but if it would be not the same level of Shachrit and Mincha, then if you took off your belt, you don't have to put it back on. You can eat and then pray the arvit. The implication is, if arvit would be the same obligation of shachrit and mincha, if you took off your belt, you would have to put your belt on, and you have to pray right away. So the Gemara says, "V'tfilat mincha." We know mincha. There's no question that mincha is an obligation to pray. And we all know that if you started, we said that if you took off your belt, you're ready to go, you're starting to get ready to eat. You washed your hands for eating, or you took off your belt, even though you were not supposed to eat before you pray, we allow you to go ahead and to continue and go ahead and eat. And then after you finish eating, you have a right to go ahead and then you'll pray. So that's what the Gemara is asking. But everybody holds that mincha is that level of obligation. And Tanan, yet we know the rabbis were lenient with you. The rabbi said that if you took off your belt to eat, even though it's time to pray mincha, you have a right to go ahead and to continue and to eat. And then after you eat, you go ahead and you'll pray. And by the way, this allowance, like we said, is dependent on what time of the day we're referring to, right? For sure, we're talking about mincha gedola time, right? If you started your meal, whatever's called starting the meal, and the Gemara teaches starting the meal does not necessarily mean you started the meal by going ahead and actually starting to eat the food, right? That's a big chidush of the Gemara. Starting, morning Emmanuel, is not only eating, starting the eating. Taking the haircut is not just they started cutting your hair. Taking the bathhouse is not starting where we said the chidush is even if you just put on the apron on top of you to take the haircut, even if you just started getting undressed to take the wash house, to take the bath, that's already called starting. So tomorrow we'll see more about this issue that the Gemara is bringing a question on what we said earlier. I want to wish everyone a Chodesh Tov, and it should be a beautiful month. Amen. Thank you for joining. By the way, I believe, Mr. David, every second counts. Every word counts. Every word is a mitzvah. Mr. David, take every word is a mitzvah. So 5 minutes, you got 1,000 mitzvot. Thank you. Thank you for your encouragement. Thank you. You too. All the best. You too. Chodesh Tov. Mr. David.